The Sony A9 III brings some really exciting capabilities to photographers that, quite frankly, it's never been done before. And that's all thanks to the global shutter. But with this new technology, there's been a lot of questions that have been brought up, specifically about a topic that I personally love here on this channel, and that's using flash photography with the camera. It's being said, and I've experienced it, you could shoot with a flash anywhere from up to 1/16,000th of a second and possibly beyond, all the way up to 1/80,000th of a second. That's all depending on which aperture it is that you're trying to sync your flash with. But with that being said, there was a man who was at the launch who had a very unique perspective because he was there lighting one of the coolest sets at Creative Space with Profoto lighting. He actually works with Profoto, and I asked him if he would come onto the channel and answer some questions for us, because he actually was able to use the A9 III with Profoto lighting, and he's gonna answer a lot of questions for us. So with that being said, this video is not sponsored by Profoto. They didn't pay anything to be a part of this. Cliff is actually a personal friend of mine from my days of being an ambassador for Profoto. And I asked him if he would come on and share his experience and hopefully shed some light on some misconceptions that are out there right now about the A9 III and using it with an off-camera flash. So with that being said, let's get into the interview. All right, so Cliff, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So, my name's Cliff Hausner. Hopefully some other people out there know my name's Cliff Hausner. I've been working as a photographer since the age of 12. I had my first picture published when I was 16. My dad was a photojournalist. He worked for the New York Times for 45 years, and I used to go out with him on assignments, and I fell in love with photography. My dad discouraged me from being a photographer. He said, you can do anything in life you want except be a photographer. And so exactly what he told me not to do is what I ended up doing. Fell in love with photography, and I decided to go into an area of photography that photojournalists know nothing about, which is lighting. So I stuck with that. And during that time, all of that time, as I was working as a photographer, I did other things as well. I had my own graphic design firm, advertising agency. I was a partner in that agency, but all the time remaining in photography. Most of my clients were photography companies. So that way I was able to take my love of photography and work it into what I was doing as a full-time profession. And then at some point I decided that I was going to go and work in the photo field. And I ended up working with Profoto. So the last 25 years, I've been doing sales and marketing for them. Anybody who lives in the New York metro area hopefully knows me or may have seen me do lecture and give classes and teach photographers. You'll see me at events like WPPI and imaging. And that's where a lot of people know me from.
So you had a very kind of unique perspective on the A9 III because what people may or may not know is when Sony announced this camera in New York City at the Creative Space event, they had multiple sets within this building. And one of the sets, which I got to say was like one of the coolest sets I've ever seen for any launch event, for anything. It was literally just one of the coolest sets that I've ever seen. And I was really happy to see that you were at that set. But you had the opportunity to be there with not just that new camera, but also with your Profoto lights. And so you had a kind of a unique perspective with setting that up, working, with the settings. So the question is, which lights did you use with the A9 III at that launch event?
Well, let me give a little bit of background, which is that I came into this event not knowing anything about it. I just knew that they wanted a flash with very short flash duration and quick recycling time, which almost all of our flashes have short flash duration and other great capabilities as far as range of energy settings. But I went in there not knowing what this whole thing was about. And a Monday evening, they told me about this camera that's coming out, and it's a global shutter camera, and it will sync at any shutter speed, and up to 80,000th of a second. And I said, and so I was really happy. I brought Profoto Pro 11 packs and heads, and so I lit two sets with it. And basically, what I was doing is taking the lighting that they already had pre-existing on the sets and building Profoto lighting into it so they complemented each other. And that Monday night they had told me as much as they could about the camera. And the next morning I called my office as soon as I was allowed to. I called my office and I got the designers, our product designers, on the phone, and I said, "You guys have to see this thing. It is insane, and the way this camera and Profoto lighting complements each other is amazing. You guys have to see this." And so they jumped onto. I guess they were presenting online, and these guys got to see it, and they were out of their mind excited about it.
So that kind of brings up an interesting question, because I think for the longest time, especially, I mean, I might be guilty of this as well. Photographers may not fully understand what flash duration means. I think that a lot of times, I know when I would talk to people about Profoto lighting when I was an ambassador, I would talk about flash duration and kind of how that was something that would separate Profoto lights from a lot of other, studio heads that were out there. For those who, let's say I'm 10 years old, explain flash duration like if I'm 10 years old. I don't know anything about it. What is it? Why is it a thing? And why is it exciting when it comes to the A9 III?
So one of the coolest things about flash duration is kind of like shutter speeds. And when you go to a higher shutter speed, you are able to stop action. So what flash duration does is the same thing. So the stopping action, the shorter the light or the gas is in the tube of the flash, the shorter period of time that it's in there, the more it stops the action. So if you have a flash duration of 1/1000 of a second, it's like having a shutter speed of 1/1000 of a second. It will
Right.
have the same stopping action. The problem with it is that our shutter speeds and flash duration never really were able to match up, because you're only able to go to a shutter speed with a leaf shutter lens of like 1/1000th or one
Right.
1500th of a second. And this global shutter allows you to do so much more.
That's super interesting. I guess it kind of leads me into the next question, which is which lights in the Profoto lineup have that short flash duration to where it would sync up really well with the A9 III at those higher shutter speeds?
Well, pretty much every light that we have in the line. So everything from our OCF lights like the B10X and the B10X Plus, very short flash duration, quick recycling time, even though they're not, they can be plugged in, but they're basically a battery powered unit. Our D2s, which you have, or what the stopping action of those is. There's, I think, around
Yeah, I
50 or
think it's
60 thousandth of a
63,000 or
second.
something like that. It's
Uh,
some insane number.
it's some crazy number, and the recycling time on it is insane. And then, of course, I don't know if I mentioned the Pro 11. Of course, the Pro 11 has a recycling time that is incredibly fast. You can do up to 50 frames a second, and the flash duration can go as low as 1/80,000th of a second.
So I guess what's funny with you saying this is when I posted my first video about the A9 III, I was talking about a different topic, talking about the base ISO, but somebody had commented. I can't remember if it was on the YouTube video itself or if it was on Petapixel had reshared the video, and there were comments on that. But somebody was saying that there is no flashes on the market that will sync with the A9 III's super high shutter speeds. And so, what it sounds like you're saying is that there are several lights within Profoto's lineup that would sync at higher shutter speeds than what anybody has ever used before with the A9 III.
Well, that's why I went crazy for this thing. I mean, the fact that up until this point, we really didn't have, unless you're using high speed sync, and there's an incredible loss of light with high speed sync. I mean, it's a great feature, but you couldn't go above 200th of a second unless you were using a leaf shutter lens. And then you could probably go to 1500th of a second or 1000th of a second, somewhere in there, depending on what camera you were using. So with this new global shutter, it allows you to go to 80,000th of a second, and which means that your shutter speed, your shutter speed can go as high as pretty much as high as the camera has. So it's opening up a whole new world of photography, and opening up a whole new world of the way we take pictures.
One of the things that I think that people might find interesting as well is that you have the ability to sync the A9 III with these flashes, and there's another setting which people have not been talking about, which allows you to sync up your A9 III with a flash, and you could actually manually adjust it to where it's syncing up with another flash at whatever shutter speed it is that you're trying to sync it up with. So I know you had the opportunity to test these things and try these things out. What was your experience with that?
So it's just a unique feature that I've not seen in other cameras. I've never seen it in another camera. I'm assuming it's because of the global shutter that you're able to do this, but it allows you to adjust your syncing of your flash with your camera, so that as you want to go to a higher shutter speed, you can actually sync it so that you're capturing the peak of the flash. So now it's not the flash. So even if you have an extended flash, you can actually narrow down the flash so that you're actually only capturing the peak of the flash, which allows you to shoot at higher shutter speeds. I believe that's what it does. I'm not positive, but we did play with it, and those are that's basically what we were using it for. And it's a very, very unique feature, and I think it's going to allow you to really dial in the output of light, and dial in the connection between the flash and the camera, which again is a unique feature, and I guess only allowed by being able to use it with global shutter.
So I think it's interesting that, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about this, but the A9 III with these, we're talking insane shutter speeds that we're able to get to with this global shutter.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been saying this from like the moment I learned that this was a thing, that there's going to be certain types of photography that were either not able to be done in the past or were very difficult to do in the past. So from a real world kind of practical perspective, what is it? What types of photography? What do you see happening now with global shutter, with the A9 III? What types of photography can we now do that maybe we couldn't do in the past?
Well, there's a whole bunch, but one of the things that I recommend that everybody do, and or maybe you can post it as part of this talk, is Sony had used the Profoto flash in their with their pre-production models, and had photographers out shooting with it and doing all of those things that I'm about to talk about. But you'll see some images that they've created, and you'll see some BTS that will show you how they did it. But some of those things are more like some things like a stroboscopic effect. Yeah, you could see how by even sandwiching those or putting those images together, you're able to create a stroboscopic effect that you were able to do before, but at a very low power output. Now you can do it at a higher power output and still be able to get the recycling time, and still be able to have it stop action, and not have that motion blur, which you may have had before. But also, if you want to have that motion blur, you can do rear curtain sync, and have the stopping action where it's going to stop the figure, but also leave that streak behind. It's allowing you so many other things to do. So one of the other features of being able to use such a high shutter speed, and use flash photography, is it's the only type of I mean, you can't do this in filmmaking. You can do it in photography, which is I can basically take nighttime and turn it into daytime, and daytime into nighttime, by just changing shutter speeds and adjusting my shutter speed, not even adjusting the output of my light. I can just adjust shutter speeds. And now that I can go to a higher shutter speed, I can literally bring down that ambient light and make it look like nighttime. And the other thing is, it's now you're not going into a situation where you have to go with what the situation is. Like, you walk into a situation where you didn't expect it to be an overcast, dark day, but now you can go into those situations, and with lighting and with this camera, now you can control the output. You can control what your camera is able to do, and you can basically adjust it to turn it into daytime, and take a nighttime look and turn it into daytime, or the opposite. It's a very unique feature to be able to do, and also being able to shoot outside without having to use with being able to use a very shallow depth of field without having to use neutral density filters. These are all things that are unique to being able to use this flash and this camera.
So it sounds like with a lot of what you're saying, like the A9 III has something very special. And I know that with what you do with Profoto, you work with a lot of different cameras. I mean, you've been doing this for a while. So I know just in your regular everyday walk of life, you use a lot of different cameras. Um, is it more of the same? Like, is this all just like hype? Is this all just noise? Or, is there something truly special here that kind of makes it different than other things that you've had experience with?
Well, look, there are other camera systems that I use, and I use them on a regular basis. I'm one of those very lucky people who gets pretty much to shoot with any camera he wants. So I choose to shoot with as many cameras as I can. I have latched on to a couple of cameras. I love some medium format stuff that I use on a regular basis. But and I like that for portraiture, and I like it for a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. But this camera's, it's not. I think people think that Sony's giving it hype, that they're hyping this thing, but I think what I saw with it is some unique features and unique things that I wasn't able to do with other camera systems. And for those things, if those things are important to you, then this camera will be important to you. So, in other words, I think your opportunity to create unique images with this camera is again, it's not for all photographers, but there are a lot of photographers who want to use it, and will find that they can do things with this camera that they couldn't even imagine to do with other camera systems.
I think for somebody like me who, does a lot of flash photography, this is a dream camera. This is something that I can like, I'm still sitting here now exploring different creative sides of my brain, thinking like, what is it that I could do now that I've not been able to do, or that's been a lot more difficult to do? And so it's brought a lot of excitement. I know just to me, being able to see that this camera could do this with flashes, it's very exciting.
One of the funny things is when I told our product designers about this, and they started watching, and then we would go back and forth, and they were talking about things that I knew nothing about. They were talking about stuff, and I've been doing this for a long time, 30 plus years, and they were bringing up things that I never even thought of, and they were talking about things that are possibilities, and some of it I understood, some of it I didn't. So their excitement about it, and finding ways that we can make these two things work together is I think there's a lot more possibilities than I've even explained to you, because there's stuff that I don't know about, some things I haven't even thought about, but hopefully they're going to be able to narrow it down for me, and help me figure out some of the additional things that I can do with my photography and lighting in combination with each other.
So, Cliff, thank you so much for sharing your experience, sharing your expertise. And I'm personally very excited to get the A9 III. It's going to be here in the studio very soon. So if you're watching this video right now, make sure that you subscribe, stay tuned, because as soon as that camera comes in, I'm going to be using my camera to do a photo shoot. I'm going to shoot outdoors, shoot indoors. I'm going to put this thing through the test so that I can bring actual images to you shot with this equipment. So make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with that. Like this video if you enjoyed it and if you learned something new. And while you're here, I've got a lot of videos about flash photography, and I'm going to put up a playlist here of some great videos that might lead you down the rabbit hole to learning more about flash photography. So check out one of those videos, and I will see you next time.